What's up guys, welcome back to another video with Audi C7 owners. And today I am jumping into a little bit of maintenance from something that we kind of messed up when we did my engine swap. Today we're going to be replacing the front main seal, otherwise known as the front crankshaft seal on my 3.0T supercharged engine. So if you want to know how to do it, stick around. So the car is already in service position. If you've got a C7, A6, A7, we have a video on how to do this. It's super simple once you have the bumper off. So there'll be a link in the description below. Going forward, this should be the same no matter what kind of supercharged 3.0T you have. Pretty sure it's going to be the same for your CREC updated supercharged engines, but maybe there's some small differences. But in any case, once you've got the car in service position, you have to remove 3 things to be able to access all of the 9 bolts that hold on the front main seal flange. You need to remove your water pump pulley, this idler pulley here, and your crank pulley. If you don't know how to remove your crank pulley, we got a video on that. That'll also be in the description below. But I haven't made a video on water pump stuff or this idler pulley, so I'll tell you how to do that. When you go to break loose the bolts for the water pump pulley as well as the crank pulley, you want to make sure you still have all your belts on, because that's going to hold a whole lot of tension on there, make it a lot easier for you to be able to break them loose. So basically what I did is I hold the supercharger belt and I get good leverage on each of them, just crack them loose without letting the engine rotate to the left. That's bad. You don't want to do that. If it rotates at all, you want to rotate clockwise. But hold it still, just get some good leverage on a wrench and break them loose. This is 3 M10 bolts. I'll show you right here. So those come loose real easy. The idler pulley is just one single M10 bolt that screws into the engine. You don't have to have a pulley, or I'm sorry, a belt on that to get it loose. Super simple. And then it all depends on what kind of crank pulley you have. I've got the JXB hardware. So these are 10mm ARP bolts, which make life a lot easier versus trying to use triple squares. But once you have all those off, you can start to access the 9 bolts that hold on the flange. Before I do that though, I'm going to get some cans of brake clean and I'm going to clean this mess up, because you can see where it leaked out the bottom here since we didn't get this fully seated correctly when we installed this on my engine swap. You can see that it just sprayed oil debris everywhere. It's nice and dirty. It's all up in everything. So I'm going to try and get this cleaned up as much as I can before we start prying this thing apart. All right, all nice and clean now. You do not have to drain your oil for this. There's no oil that sits in there. Basically, there's just something inside that flange that as the engine runs, it squirts oil in there on occasion. So you can expect some to come out when you pop this flange off, but it's not gonna dump all your engine oil. Having said that, I still have a drain pan down there just in case, and that also caught all the stuff we were cleaning. But I've already cracked loose all 9 of these bolts. They are T30 Torx bolts. So be really careful when you do it. You don't want to strip any of these, right? But there's 9 of them. They're all inside the flange, which the flange has a lip here. It's pretty easy to see with it in service position. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all those. Something to keep in mind, this does have RTV sealant on the back, so it won't just pop off easily. So as you remove it, be really careful around your crankshaft. You don't want to damage anything there, scratch it up or anything like that. But you will have to pry this off slowly, and then we're going to have to clean up the surface of the engine. As you can see, we got all the bolts out, and you can see RTV and other debris on them. So we're going to make sure we take those and brush them clean. Any kind of bolt that you're working with that's going directly into the motor, you want to make sure you clean it up really well so you don't have any issues when you screw it back in. Probably the most pain in the butt part of this job is going to be cleaning the old RTV off of the surface, just because there's tight areas to work in and we got to make sure it's perfectly clean. So I'm going to go in there with probably some kind of a scraper and just be super careful not to mar the surface of the engine. I've also got some green Scotch-Brites that I'll use to scruff it up and get it nice and clean. And then we're going to spray it down with brake clean. We'll blow it out with compressed air and we'll vacuum everything and just make sure that nothing gets inside this channel here that can possibly do damage to the engine. We're also going to clean up the surface of the actual crankshaft as well. We're going to be really delicate with it, just making sure there's no debris on it. I just finished cleaning up the surface of the engine where the crankshaft seal and plate go to. And that took probably about 45 minutes in and of itself. And I used all of these tools here. Green Scotch-Brite, a wire brush, which I didn't have my brass one, so it was just really light with this metal one. This is basically a guitar pick. This actually came in super handy. And then these 2 small, I got a small flathead screwdriver and then a right angle pick that just came in really handy for scratching off some of the sealant that was on there. Just be really gentle and don't mar the surface of your engine. Another pro tip is that brake clean will help break down the RTV, and it made it a lot easier to come off. Something else to keep in mind, below the crankshaft there's a channel that I'm pretty sure leads down into the oil pan, and I'm sure some of this gasket maker debris fell into there, so I eventually got to paper towel in there, do that from the start. Because I definitely am going to have to change my oil after I get this all done just to make sure nothing gets gunked up. But the next step is going to be cleaning all this up and then putting on the new crankshaft seal. Let's talk about the crankshaft seal and what is supposed to happen. So this is a brand new one. This is made by L-Ring, which if I'm not mistaken makes the OEM ones, and you can get them a lot cheaper than OEM cost. And you can see that we've got this orange seal here, and on the back we got this kind of like felt color seal. Now this is the back of the plate. This is what's actually going to mate to your engine surface. And if you look at this line here, that is a track where we're going to be putting in RTV sealant. And you're just going to lay a bead down into that. But you can see how that ring, how that seal faces towards the engine. And you need to make sure it stays that way. Now let me show you what happened with mine that was leaking. So this is the side, you can see the RTV here, but you can see that that seal is facing the front of the engine, right? So this is the front of the plate, right? You can tell with the lip here, and you can see that both the felt and the rubber seal are facing the front of the engine, and so that's why we were having an oil leak. So we need to do something to be able to put this on and get it to keep that direction on that seal. There are probably some specialized tools, which I don't have, but what I'm gonna try to do is get something that's a thin piece of plastic and put it on here to where when I press this plate on, I can pull that plastic out and that falls on the crankshaft where it needs to be. And we pretty much only have one shot at it. I mean, yeah, I can take it off and redo the RTV, but that's such a pain in the butt. So I'm gonna play around with some stuff before I put RTV on this and see how it works, and we'll go from there. Let's talk about the last bit of prep before we actually put the new seal back on. Of course, we've scraped everything, we've cleaned it, I've sprayed it with brake clean, I've wiped it all out. I've started to blow it with compressed air, and there's a port somewhere up here, I think it's right there, that sends air into the engine, and it blew oil out from that little channel on the bottom. So I had to clean it again. The big thing is you want to make sure that your crankshaft is completely dry and clean. Make sure you get like blue paper towel or something, wrap it around and like really run that around there, dry it up. Even just let it sit here and dry on its own for a while. Make sure there's nothing on there because your new seal is a dry friction seal. So we can't use any lubricants or anything to help get it on there. So just make sure that's really, really well cleaned. And we're gonna go to the workbench in a second and show you guys the RTV application, and then we'll get it onto the engine. Let's talk about how we're going to get the new seal on and make sure we don't have a repeat of what happened last time. So this is the old one that I have, and I'm gonna show you what I did. I got a solo cup. I cut the center section, the smooth section out, and I kind of wrapped it around the crankshaft itself to get an idea of the size that I needed for, you know, being able to grab on there. And I taped it up, made sure it was nice and smooth. And the idea here, and I just tested it out and it seems like it'll work. We're gonna go in through the direction from the front to the back, and you might have to fold it like this, and that's fine. But once it's in here, I start to press it out on the back side and make sure that I've got that seal around the plastic of the solo cup facing the correct direction, right? So now it's facing the correct direction. And then this, basically when we go on here, we're gonna put the RTV along the track, and when I go to put this on the engine, I'll basically be using the cup to get it onto the crankshaft. So if this is the crankshaft, it'll go on here. Once that's on all the way, I can slide this up and it won't push the seal out. The seal will be stuck that way. I can slide that up, get some bolts through the face of it and pull it to the engine. And once it's on there, I can pull the cup out and the seal will be on the crankshaft in the correct direction. And if you get really close, you can see that that seal has like these ribs on there, and that's what's gonna attach to the crankshaft and keep the oil from leaking out. We've got our brand new plate set up. This part is the part that makes me the most nervous. So I've got the right stuff here. We're using Permatex Right Stuff 1 Minute Black, and this is recommended by Alex from AM Tuned. So we've got it on here, and we're basically just gonna run a bead along that entire channel that's in the edge of the crankshaft seal plate here. We have 5 minutes to get it on there, so I'm gonna get it on there and immediately move it over. You won't be able to see me move it to the car and apply it, but I'll show you guys what it looks like once we get it back onto the car. So we've successfully got the new crank seal, plate seal, whatever you want to call it, the crankshaft front main seal in place. I've got all the bolts just hand tightened right now. So now we're going to torque them down, and you torque each one of these to 9 Newton meters, and you need to tighten in a diagonal pattern. Something to keep in mind, this is aluminum and it bends easily. So you really want to make sure you tighten this down evenly across the plate, tighten it diagonally, and don't over tighten it. Do not over torque them, don't strip a bolt. Let me go ahead and knock it out. All right, so we've completed the front main seal installation. I think we got it. It looks really good. Don't see any of the orange seal sticking out the front, so hopefully job successful. I've got everything torqued for all of those 9 bolts. Remember, those are 9 Newton meters. We're gonna let it sit for probably about an hour or so, but the right stuff seals and sets pretty quickly. From now on, it's just reassembly of the engine, put everything back together. When you put things back together, the supercharger idler pulley, that goes back and gets torqued to 42 Newton meters, and the water pump pulley bolts get torqued to 9 Newton meters. All right, so I hope you guys found the DIY helpful. It was relatively straightforward. The most difficult 2 parts were cleaning up the engine surface area. That took a lot of work and just tedious time consuming. And then for me, just the most anxiety ridden part was putting the RTV on and getting it back on there. But that solo cup trick worked. Shout out to Alex from AM Tune for walking me through this and giving me some tips and tricks on making sure I could do this at home, so I can hopefully eliminate this tiny little oil leak that I've got. I know people are going to ask me, so I'll go ahead and address it. Why didn't I use the 034 upgraded billet seal? And a couple reasons. The first and number one reason is I had a leftover OEM front crank seal from my engine swap. I bought 2 just in case. Number 2, the price, the L-ring one, which is the OEM one, I believe that it cost me like 27 bucks, whereas the 034 one is over $100 and something. Now these things do fail, but they're not a super common point of failure that like happens all the time where you're gonna be having to do this very often. I mean, my car had 160,000 miles and it still wasn't leaking. The only reason this one was leaking is because we installed it incorrectly and we got that seal flip the other way. So I was fine putting in the OEM equivalent when doing this one, especially since I have one laying around. So in any case, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll have all those links to the other videos I mentioned in the description below. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video from Audi C7 owners.